kids. This is Learning to Dad.
I'm the cool dad. That's my thing.
With Tyler Ross.
But what I do have are a very particular set of skills.
I'm gonna have fun, and you're gonna have fun.
So here we are doing a podcast, Pierre. How about introduce yourself a little bit? Who are you? What do you do? How do we know each other?
Yeah. Well, my name is Pierre Azzam. I'm a psychiatrist turned professional coach who works with men and founder of Braver Man. And we met through mutual friends and got to know each other in Wyoming during an expedition to Cloud Peak.
Yeah, 3 days in the woods with strangers is a kind of crash course in getting to know somebody and what they're made of and what they're about. And it was awesome. How did you, like, I feel like I was kind of on the outside of that group because the group had kind of all connected with each other online at some point. Is that correct?
Yeah, to an extent, at least Tom, Kevin, and Greg.
Grant, and I think Grant's part of that group as well.
Yeah.
So what is, and who lead? Are you part of that group, or are you?
Yeah. Well, you know, I am.
Yeah.
To an extent, and Grant's not part of it, but Kevin and Greg and Tom are, and it grew out of the work, the one-on-one work that I'd been doing as part of Braver Man. And that extended into some group work. It extended into a community of purpose-driven men who were building these really critical attributes of mature masculine mindset so that we can maximize fulfillment and impact in our lives. And so part of Kevin's decision to put together an expedition to Cloud Peak grew out of working in a team with two of the other guys who were on the expedition, and Kevin sort of brought men from all walks of life and all backgrounds to Wyoming, and hoping to do it again.
Yeah, I had never done anything like that. Anyone listening, it was, I guess, supposed to be 24 miles, but we probably did 26. Thanks, Kevin. And we got to 13,170 feet out of Cloud Peak, the peak of the Bighorns. And yeah, like I said, I'd never done anything like that before. Had that been part of your life's experience, like an outback country?
No, not at all. It was definitely a first, and a really great one. I thought in many ways the coming together in real life, especially around a shared challenge, really felt important. I think that's true for many men's groups, but particularly true for men at large.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, tell me about Braver Man. On Instagram, I believe it's braver.man.
That's right.
So what is Braver Man?
Yeah. So I started Braver Man in 2018, initially as a platform to work one-on-one in professional coaching with men. At the time, I was working as a psychiatrist in an pretty big academic medical center, and became more and more interested in working with men at times of big transition. And that really grew out of an interest in early fatherhood. A small part of my work was helping moms to withdraw safely from opioids and alcohol in the general hospital, and then to provide a transition to psychiatric and mental health services thereafter. I became really interested in the services that were, really the lack of services that were available to fathers. And that became my sort of entryway into an interest in helping men to maximize mental health and mental fitness. And in that process, I sought training and certification in professional coaching. Really, initially, I'd intended to use that as just a complement to my work. I didn't intend to jump ship. I hadn't really thought about starting a platform for professional coaching for men or for building awareness to topics related to men's mental health. And Braver Men has sort of become a platform for both, for individual one-on-one work with men. On Instagram, it's largely a platform for awareness to topics related to men's mental health, particularly for men at times of some important life transition, including early fatherhood. And what's expanded, it really expanded into a community, one that's growing and one that really is centered around building mindset, around building connection, around executing on bold, challenging, sustainable actions. And so, yeah, it's now a platform that's really designed for men who might want to work together one-on-one or in group, or men who just might want to gain some awareness to topics related to men's mental health.
Mental health, men's mental health particularly, is something that I'm seeing and reading more about. The traditional gender roles didn't really have flexibility to consider men's mental health, but it's becoming more forefront in main conversations. Can you speak to why that may be the case, or maybe, what the deficiency is in us humans that, we need to go talk to somebody and get some help?
Yeah. Well, I think that's a really important question, even though like the framing of the question feels important, because these are challenges that men have faced in silence for generations. And in particular, the silence around talking about vulnerability, talking about mental health, has limited our awareness and limited our capacity to comfortably seek help when we need it. So hard to tell that things are necessarily worsening with respect to mental health, or that we're approaching a time of greater deficiency. I'd be reluctant to say that. I think we're approaching a time of greater awareness to what has long been there for many men.
So,
yeah.
As someone who considers himself fairly self-aware of and getting better at, acknowledging my own things and stuff, what are some of the key indicators for someone that's on the cusp of, really benefiting from coaching? I'd argue that everybody would benefit from coaching mental health. Of course, 100% of people could use that sort of support. But when it comes to like the people on the edge that could really go one way or the other, or maybe some internal thoughts one might have that would go, Dr. Pierre recommends that you do this because you're thinking those things or doing those things.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think I think it speaks to the many different ways guys could get help. And part of my interest in professional coaching and starting Braver Man was not necessarily to undermine or sort of lessen the importance of more traditional mental health care. I enjoyed being a psychiatrist very much, find it really important for men to be able to seek appropriate mental health services. One of the things that I that I did note was it's hard for a lot of guys to seek mental health services. We didn't do and haven't done a terrific job as a mental health professional community to make mental health care approachable to men, to really respond to many of the questions that guys have around why is this experience happening to me, or even what is happening to me, and how can I engage in work to help get better. And even more so, how do I do that while also not losing a sense of who I am as a man, not losing
That's
a
very
sense
important.
of feeling in charge, feeling in control. And I think that for those who might be interested in coaching, one of the things that I find to be quite a bit different between psychotherapy and professional coaching is a focus on the present and on the future, essentially helping you to go from where you are currently to where you want to be in the future. There's not so much of a focus on interpreting why something is happening, or wronging or righting deficiencies. And I think for men who might find that they're experiencing changes to mood or thought process or anxiety, or challenges with addictions that feel really distressing or impairing, usually those are situations in which I will recommend men turning to therapists or to psychiatrists if medication is something that's being considered. I think for many men who are thinking about coaching, and I'm with you, I think most men would benefit. Most people generally benefit from coaching. But I think those who really excel at it are ones who might recognize something is missing. They may not even know what that something is, but they're able to be self-aware enough to recognize what it might mean for them to experience fulfillment, what might be holding them back in terms of their own thought patterns, and where they want to go in the future. May not know exactly how to get there, but that's the whole point of coaching, being able to delineate the finer elements of what might bring someone fulfillment and taking small and steady steps to get there.
And coaching as a word seems so much more approachable than does therapy or psychology. When it comes to someone seeking that, is that usually at the advice of someone else, or your clients or the people that are looking for coaching, people that are self-aware enough to do it on their own accord?
Yeah. I think I'd say it's about half and half.
No kidding. Yeah.
Yeah. I think a lot of times there's a suggestion, and often by a partner, wife, girlfriend, female family member. And so in many ways, while the platform is designed for awareness to men's mental health, a lot of times it's building awareness to men's mental health to people regardless of gender, because everyone's got a man in their lives about whom they care and who might benefit from some awareness and empathy about what they may be experiencing.
With the interest, or well, with a lot of your clients and coaching and therapy clients in general, finding their way into an office as a result of some transition in their life, what are a couple examples of common transitions people are making that lead them to someone like you?
Yeah, there are a few. Early fatherhood's a big one. Retirement is another. I'd say in many cases, it's not a really clear, distinct transition. a lot of times it's an awareness that I'm at a point in my life where I might feel like I've succeeded. I might feel like I have a lot of accomplishments under my belt, but I don't feel very fulfilled, or I've lost track of my purpose. Maybe I never defined a purpose in the first place, and I've just kind of gone through life doing all the things that I thought I needed to do, only to find myself waking up one day feeling kind of empty or like something was missing. And I think often that's something for many men is connection, it's meaning, it's purpose. It's an awareness to one's own value outside of accomplishments or outside of achievements.
So on some level, I guess we are all that way. I'm certainly that way. Like there are days I wake up feeling that way or the other way. If I'm walking into your office as a first-time client, what are some of the questions that you might ask me to kind of figure out what direction we're going to go?
Yeah. I might ask you, what brought you in right now? Like, what's happening right now in your life that led you to a place of wanting to make a change? And where would you like to be in a year's time? That's just a start, though. I think what's more important than even getting a sense of clarity around where someone wants to be is what makes that place so important to you. Like, a lot of times many guys will come in saying, I think I'm done with a career that I've been in for 20 or 30 years. And I might ask them this question, and they'll go into the detail around the career that they want to build or something that they want to build. And often there's a lot in there. There's a lot of self-expectation and ideas that may be societal or maybe interpretations of what they should be doing. And I think one of the most important questions to ask in those scenarios is, if you were to do that, if you were to build the life that you're looking to build within a year's time, the time is arbitrary, what would change for you? How would you be feeling internally? What would your everyday experience look like? And often the work is actually trying to build that internal experience, that daily life experience, and then cultivating the next few steps from a place of joy and love rather than from a place of expectation or feeling like you ought to or have to do something in order to prove your worth. That feels really true for many men. And I'd say particularly true for dads who might find themselves feeling like they've got to achieve something in order to be a good man, in order to be a good father.
Yeah. I'll take kind of a semi-hard tangent and probably circle back here, but because this podcast does center around working dads, that's a great entrepreneur dads. We've had wonderful, incredible moms and doctors and even sex therapists that we've talked to. But we talked about it before. One of the first questions I asked you was, "Oh, you help young dads? Like, well, tell me about your kids. Tell me what your fatherhood is like." So, spill that out a little bit.
Yeah. So I'm not a dad, and early on, as I was looking at creating Braver Man, a big part of the impetus around that was around helping new dads. There's a big part of me that Tyler just felt like an imposter coming into this space. And I think without some hard questions that were posed to me very early on, I think I could have skipped past my interest and not devoted much energy or attention to this really strong feeling of wanting to help fathers. But I mean, I've worked as a psychiatrist for a long time, and as a physician for longer. And at no point along the way did I ever think I was not allowed to try to help someone with a certain type of cancer, for example, unless I had the same.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's interesting in the parenting space, and having connected to a lot of people who do have impact, at least on social media or other platforms, for raising awareness to the needs of parents, mom, dad, or both. That in many cases, the discussion has a lot to do with their own personal experience. And I actually didn't see the value then of not being a father, of not having my own set of expectations or experiences that might cloud my engagement with a new dad.
Mm-hmm.
So in many ways, it's actually been a real advantage. While I thought in the beginning that it would be a liability, it would hurt me in some way. It's been a reminder to ask questions, to not make assumptions about a father's experience, to not project my own experience as a father onto another man. And so it's led me to be really curious about each man's experience in early fatherhood or fatherhood in general. It's going to be a little bit different each time.
Mm-hmm.
But I find often it's very easy to project my own experience in something with another man who shares a similar experience. I don't do that with dads because I don't have a niece and two nephews that I spoil to death, but I don't make any assumptions when working with new dads that my experience somehow is like another man's. So it's been actually quite wonderful. And for others out there who might be really interested in helping fathers or helping parents who aren't parents themselves, I think the more the merrier in terms of people who are looking to actually do good by parents.
With that, I guess you can be more kind of objective in that sense. So a lot of your interactions are with new dads, young dads. I remember the hardest part of my relationship with my wife was when our kids we had a 1 and a 2-year-old. We had a 2-year-old and she was pregnant, and a puppy. She's on bed rest. We're moving at the same time. Beard's falling out, turning gray. Like this is. Talk to me about like other experiences that new dads you're having kind of habitually, and maybe a couple of the things that new dads that are going through that now can do to help get their head right.
Yeah. There are a lot of common themes. And at least in the realm of fatherhood mental health, a lot of the work that I've done with fellow mental health professionals has been in the arenas of postpartum depression, postpartum anxiety in fathers.
Mm-hmm.
which I think a lot of times people are surprised to hear is even a thing.
Yeah.
And so many times it is a matter of working with dads to improve mindset, physical fitness, and habits that might prevent a progression into an experience like major depression. But I think there are a few core tenets of the transition to fatherhood that feels common among men. And perhaps the biggest one is this change in identity. Like, who am I as a man now?
Mm-hmm.
And what are my priorities? What's the new tension that's going to happen between priorities in my life other than being a father and taking care of my kids? What's my relationship with my wife or partner going to look like? That's a huge one.
Mm-hmm.
And how do I navigate or see myself as a father? What role models might I have in terms of providing the type of fathering that I really envision for myself? And so I think that unfortunately there's not a lot of research. I mean, there's a growing amount of research on early fatherhood and mental health outcomes related to early fatherhood, but there's not a ton that actually drive scientific recommendations. But the ones, I mean, there's not a lot of research on fathering generally and on fatherhood and mental health. It's certainly growing, and I would say it's growing in around the world. Certain places, particularly Australia, New Zealand, the UK, a little bit less. And behind that are the US and Canada in terms of producing research and providing services that are specific to fathers. But some of that research suggests things like ensuring proper one-on-one baby bonding time. Really identifying and setting clear expectations and values around what it means for you to be a father. Not seeing caretaking as babysitting, seeing it as very much a part of who you are, very much a part of how you intend to show up as a father. Seeking mentoring if it's available. Now, that's a tough one. Not all of us have great relationships with our dads. Dad may not be present. You might not have been present before, or there's something that interferes with the type of closeness that might allow him to mentor.
Mm-hmm.
I think this is where men's community becomes really important. And it becomes really important in general, but I think especially for new dads, the sense that I'm not alone in the process. There are other guys who are doing this alongside me. I don't have to try to figure it out on my own or reinvent the wheel each time. And I could interact and turn to other guys who are facing some of the same things. That's really important. On top of that, one of the most consistent findings around risk factors for depression, anxiety, is limited social support, which I'd say most guys in the US anyway, but I'd argue throughout much of the West, struggle with. There is an epidemic of isolation among men.
Yeah.
And so perhaps the biggest is to connect and develop a sense of belonging, not just to baby, not just to partner, but also to other men who might be able to help shore you up, to challenge you when times are challenge and support you when times get tough.
Yeah, I grew up playing sports. I always had a team that I played with. We all put our hands in the huddle and we, slap each other and, congratulate each other. And there was that kind of sense of like we're all in it together.
Yeah.
But for the first time that I ever felt like genuinely part of a community was it started in 2019 when I joined the jiu-jitsu gym that I participate in now. How I met and got to know Grant from our trip. And I found, in addition to the practical skills and the exercise and just the general fun of the physicality of it, I'm around a group of mostly men, a couple of moms, a couple of women, but mostly men that have commonalities of a desire to get better, an ability to be patient, and some level of discipline because we get there at 5:30 in the morning, and not a lot of people naturally wake up at 4:30 to get there. So, and I've found community there in that I get parenting advice from all those guys. I want my kids to be around their kids because I think they're all amazing and high value people with high values and character. So for me, that's been my first real community outside of my family, and it's incredible. It's way more than I ever expected. I'm giving way more than I could ever give. But are there some examples of other outlets for people that you've seen that they found this community? It's like, what are some of the things that you would recommend people try, or some of the things that your clients have had success trying that folds them into a community and is helpful in that way?
Yeah, jiu-jitsu communities, I think, have done this in a beautiful way, because I think for many men there is a sense of shared leveling up, of physicality, of discipline, that brings men together in a way as to build both individual value and community and brotherhood. And so I think that's not necessarily limited to BJJ. There might be other sports teams or leagues that kind of allow you to do something similar. But I've heard that from many men, that being part of a sports league or being part of a gym or a club or a dojo might allow for some of that connection. I have seen a growing number, and for me on my end, in terms of building community, that's been a slow and steady thing that's been partly mostly virtual, and I think will increasingly be in person. But there are a number of men-specific groups and father-specific groups that are emerging online, and that are emerging from mostly men who are fathers, who are really looking to support other men through the period of early fatherhood and beyond. And so I think we're seeing more of those, and my hunch is that they'll continue to grow.
The accountability factor, having somebody else to go, hey, you weren't there this morning, or hey, we had this group chat online, you weren't there, where were you? Even if just somebody checking on you, like, if that's all they're doing, it's so validating and so, I don't know, it makes you feel loved and cared about.
It does.
Even if it's just something as simple as like, saw you pumping your gas when I was driving by earlier, missed your class, or whatever. And
it's huge.
to speak to my guys, I've never said I love you so much to other than within this community of people, my family
Yeah.
and this group of people. So anybody that is looking for a community, go just keep trying stuff. I think is like, if that's not your group, give it a try something
Yep.
else, but just put yourself out there, give it a shot. I never thought I was that guy. Lucky enough to be that guy now.
Yeah. Well, I think most guys don't. Most
Yeah.
guys think, I've had a lot of bad experiences interacting with other guys.
Mhm.
And so there's going to be a lot of hesitation to engage in, like, to put yourself out there. I think that's super common. And, unfortunately, it's a testament to the ways in which historically, or at least of late, many of us have interacted with one another, many men in particular, where there is a sense of one-upmanship, non-friendly competition. There's something really important, I think, about friendly competition and leveling up and inviting each other to level up. I think a lot of men have experienced a sense of feeling alone even when they were interacting with another man, feeling like we could never go beyond a surface level discussion, feeling unheard or unseen. And so I think there's a bigger force at play here, and that is helping men to connect in ways and spaces where we see each other with respect, with depth, with meaning, with curiosity, without necessarily spending more time trying to one up the next guy, trying to give advice that's not solicited, spending too much time in our head trying to sort out what the right thing to say is rather than connecting in a meaningful way. And I think one of the things that I appreciated just in our time together in Wyoming was the opportunity to see each other a little more deeply. And a lot of that was through shared action, through a shared mission. It's hard to do, but it's not impossible. And I don't think that all men have had the opportunity to be a part of that. And so I think when many men do have that opportunity or do take that opportunity, it tends to be pretty life-changing. It also tends to help rewrite the script that that putting myself out there will be unsafe.
Yeah.
I think for a lot of men, unfortunately, that's been the case.
You get having to contend with even the slightest bit of discomfort does not seem like something the average person is willing to do, certainly not on their own. It was thanks to Grant's encouragement that I was like, okay, I'll fly across the country and I'll go do something I've never done with a bunch of people I never met before. And that has since led to trying other things as well. Now that's a pretty grand move to, spend but it was a date on the calendar to circle, training and preparing and all this. But it doesn't have to be that dramatic, to step out of the comfort zone. But I think that is completely necessary.
Yeah, I agree.
Because I'm that guy that doesn't, there's some people you just jive with right away, and then other people but typically that's not the case. I find myself in jiu-jitsu, it took me weeks or months to get close with a lot of those guys, but we did over time. But stick me in a bar at 5 o'clock with a beer watching the game, it could be the same 10 people sitting at the bar. I could go there 10 years in a row and not get to know any of those guys very well and not feel like I could say I'm part of it because I'm there, but it doesn't, the connection feeling isn't there for me. I don't know if that's just me or someone else, but do you have conversations with people and go, yeah, I play golf with the same guys every Saturday. That's my community. But like, they didn't know you got divorced 6 months ago. Like,
Nope.
yeah.
Yep. That's really common.
Yeah.
Really common. Like I could be part of something, but no one knows anything about what's happening in my life.
Mhm.
Because we're really good at hiding.
We are.
Really good at it. Like we've mastered it.
Mhm.
And in many cases, that's been out of necessity for many of us.
Well, why
And
do you
so,
suppose?
yeah, well, um, I think
Systemic expectations?
yes,
Yeah.
systemic expectations um, of men to be strong, invulnerable, self-sufficient, daring, the alpha,
Mhm.
all-knowing. Now, those are traditional norms of masculinity that have been overvalued for several generations, and many have been internalized. So for many guys, there's an expectation that if I show up not fully competent, not fully self-sustaining, self-sufficient, not fully strong, then I'm not a man.
Yeah.
And it 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 puts a lot of guys in this sort of existential place of not being enough, not being valuable enough. And so for most of us, I think there is a sense of wanting to portray a certain image. Now, those portrayals are hardly connected. Tyler, if we don't see one another's um, vulnerabilities or insecurities, we're not going to be able to relate to one another at
Mhm.
all. Like, there's just no way. And not able to relate to one another in an authentic way, because if I'm if my facade is interacting with your facade, then we're not really getting to know each other. We're just getting to know what we hope ourselves to be.
Yeah. Are there any tips, tricks, or practices for the beginner who's trying to not put out the facade and trying to be their more genuine selves, and maybe around
Sure.
that same, do you go try it with new people or try it with the old people? You ask somebody a question in a new way or ask a new question? Like, is there anything that you do to encourage people to, hey, for the first time, step out of this facade and try this?
Yeah, well, that's great. That's a really great question. I think I'll just speak from my own experience. My at least earlier parts of my life were very polished, and I hid behind that polish
Mhm.
for decades. And there are a lot of reasons for that, but it seemed like any exposure of a weakness or any exposure of something that that could be seen as deficient or hurtful might rock the boat in some way. Now, a lot of that is just my own experience growing up, where I might have had to have put up walls.
Mhm.
I would say, in most cases, um, connecting doesn't have to mean knocking down the wall altogether. It doesn't have to mean bulldozing.
Mhm.
It can just mean putting a brick down. And so typically when I talk to men about connecting, I will encourage connecting in a place that feels secure. So with someone that the man trusts.
Mhm.
Doesn't necessarily have to be old or new, but it does have to be safe. And that might look like sharing one bit of a personal experience, one bit of, under these circumstances, I felt this.
Mhm.
This is what happened in my life. I'm going through a rough time in such and such place, a rough time at work. And that has me feeling really unsure of myself. It has me feeling really angry, or has me feeling really worried, feeling really scared. Like that alone is a deeper share than most of us go. But it's not so fundamentally scary that it's gonna knock the whole wall down.
Yeah.
I think a lot of guys think when we connect to one another that we've got to start bulldozing our walls, tearing them down. And the walls are there for a purpose. They've helped to secure us and protect us. And so in order to not make it scary, and in order to make it potentially accessible to another man who might need to do the same, it usually starts with just a small share.
Yeah. And so if you do the same thing over and over again, you expect to get the same result. So you're sharing with someone, a friend, an acquaintance, coworker, whatever, for the first time, trying to connect. Maybe they're not there. Maybe they're not ready to connect with you at all, or in that moment. Like, is there some expectation that, you know, the person, the sharer, should have in response to kind of not feel like, well, I tried to take a brick down and they took it in a shitty way, so like now I'm going to put 5 more bricks up to make it even tighter.
Yeah, that's important too. So part of a share is doing it in a way that might just be a matter of building some connection, but may not be contingent upon the other person's response. So there's got to be an awareness to the other person might not respond very well to it. Or in most cases, guys do.
Yeah, in most cases they do.
In most cases, guys do. And so in the situation in which a guy doesn't, that's a bit of information, a bit of data. That might not be the man. It might be a man that you trust to connect a little more closely to. But if he's real shitty to you, then you're going to have to question, what got in the way of the connection? Is this someone that you can trust to connect further to? Is this someone with whom you might want to have a conversation? Like, hey man, I brought this up last week because I was going through a tough time and I was hoping that that you might lend me an ear. And I felt really disappointed afterwards.
Yeah.
You might also set it up. There's something really important to being able to ask for what it is that you might need. So in the collective, when we meet on we usually meet on weekly calls, and there's an opportunity to check in, but also an opportunity to get some practice making a request for support and providing it. Now, in most of these cases, we're not looking to fix another guy's marriage or workplace or bank account. And there's no way for us to, right? And so in most of these cases, the desire is just to have a space where I'm heard without judgment, where you might see a part of me. And if I want something like a playback, or if I want something like some wisdom or shared experience or advice, I'll ask you for it. And so there may be value too in a situation where you're connecting to another guy and you want to share a bit of what's happening in your life, to say, hey, I know we don't usually talk about stuff like this. I'd like to tell you a little bit about what's going on in my life. Would you, are you in a place to hear me out?
Yeah, that's a brave step on its own.
Agreed. It's a
Yeah.
huge step.
Mhm.
It's a huge step.
So, for someone who doesn't feel comfortable bringing that to a friend, is a coach the right person to try to talk to, a different kind of service?
Yeah, it can be. I think in both I think regardless of whether someone's in a position to bring it to a friend, there may be things that um are worth discussing with a professional. And
I've
so yeah, I think there's value to it.
I've personally always taken kind of a shotgun approach to the internal things that I'm contending with. Talked to the psychics, I've talked to therapists, I've talked to astrology people, I've talked to, mediums, talked to,
Yeah.
the conventional doctors, friends. But one of the things I like to do, because I'm a little bit of as much as I shotgun approach, I'm also a self-soother in some ways, that
Yeah.
I'll go do something I suck at. Like, I'll go try something completely brand new. I like piano.
Yeah.
I've never sat at a piano, never listened to piano, but that would be a perfect thing for me to go try, and I will 100% suck at it. And then that'll put me in some sort of like a humble mind space to realize that it's not all that important. Like, I don't have to be great at everything. Talking to my wife, she's been more patient with me in the way that I try to express myself, because I usually don't want to talk right now. I want to talk later so I can gather my head and say the right thing, because I don't want you to be upset. But she's gotten more patient with me bumbling through it. It's just trying and sucking at it. And then, sorry, I suck at it. I'm trying to get better at it. Be patient with me. So I don't know if you ever
That's
tell
a cool
people, go
approach.
do something you suck at.
Well, I do tell people, well, I suppose we usually work together to find what might work best for each man.
Mhm.
And so I think one thing that resonates there with the reflections of a bunch of other men who might do stuff that's similar is that putting things into perspective allows you to get out of your head a little bit.
That
Right.
actually, I wanted to ask you about getting out of your head, and like, I'm an expert at putting my feelings to the side and solving something logically, or approaching it with logic. Can you talk? Speak. I didn't mean to interrupt you. It might be
No,
down
not
that
at
same
all.
path. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah, I think that's real tough for a lot of guys, and myself included. I've been logical, analytical, mostly putting feelings aside for much of my life, despite my profession. And it's been really valuable to be able to build some awareness to feelings. You don't necessarily have to do anything with them. You don't have to force them away or change them or use them in a specific manner, but just building some awareness to what those emotions actually are. Sometimes just communicating them helps to stay the course, helps to use them in a meaningful way, helps to connect. For many men, one of the biggest challenges around seeking mental health services is a state called alexithymia, which is the inability to appreciate one's own emotions, or the inability to put into words what one is experiencing emotionally. That's not to say that guys don't experience emotion. We experience it plenty. We haven't always been invited to access those emotions in words. And many times we might not have the lexicon for it, but there's something valuable to just being able to name your emotion so that it doesn't figuratively have you by the balls. So that it doesn't come out in a way that doesn't serve you, or doesn't come out in a way that actually undermines your values or your intentions. And so for many guys, that's awareness to what's happening within our bodies, because we may not be able to access certain words, like nuanced words for emotion, but we may be able to access where we feel tight or loose, heavy or full, heavy or light, full or empty. We may be able to access where we feel warmth or coolness, what we're feeling in our extremities or in our heads or hearts. That might be far more accessible to us than the lexicon of emotion. And just even being able to name that allows for another person to experience you as you are. It's another opportunity to put down a brick, because you're not necessarily interpreting that emotion. You're not saying, I'm pissed because X. You're just saying, this is what I'm experiencing in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
We're sort of putting aside judgment. And I think for many of us, when we feel, I can speak for myself historically, and for many guys with whom I work, when we don't feel connected to an emotion, or an emotion doesn't match the state that we think we should be in, we can sometimes start to get into a loop of self-judgment. Mm-hmm. And that doesn't usually benefit too much. And frankly, emotions are signals. They're there for a reason. They may not match the situation around us, but they're not inherently good or bad. They're just signals. And so being able to name them allows us to have a little more control, a little more power over them. Doesn't mean we try to force them away, but does mean we're a little more aware to them, and then a little less likely to have them sabotage us in some way.
I find my greatest barrier to acknowledging such things as distraction, whether it's the phone or keeping myself busy or talking to somebody, or, oh, look, a bird over there. Distraction is the one thing that gets in my way. But I always tell people, when it comes to their diet and exercise, if you listen to your body's talking to you. You feel shitty? What'd you eat last? You feel good? What'd you eat last? You sleep poorly? What'd you eat before you went to sleep? Like, your body's reacting to all these things. And I listen to my body pretty well. I don't always do what it tells me to, but I'm listening at least. So when it comes to feelings, that's a little different exercise, to listen to your feelings. The first thing that pops into my head is meditation. But or just taking a beat and just having a conversation with yourself, like, what is that? Where is it? What is it doing? How does it feel? Does it feel this way, that way? And then eventually you kind of keep chipping away at it and dig to the center and find it. But are there any practices that you recommend or suggest that help people take that beat and, get rid of the distractions and kind of be within themselves and go, hear the feelings, let's see if we can parse away at them a little bit, and just to identify them, if nothing else?
Well, you're right here. It is very much, it's mindfulness. Mm-hmm. Right? It's turning your awareness to something other than the distractions in your life with an intention. And in this case, the intention is to build awareness to your emotion. Maybe it's to build awareness to your body. The distractions are everything else. The judgments, the thoughts, the sensations, the external distractors. Those are not your intended target. And so I think perhaps the most powerful is a practice of meditation or a practice of mindfulness, where the anchor is your body. It may be your breath, because I think for many men, a lot of our emotion gets centered in our heart space, in our breath, in our chest. For many, it's in our shoulders or our guts. For others, it's in our heads or our faces. And so just being aware to where things are coming up energetically is a huge practice in mindfulness. Because inevitably you're going to think, well, my face is red. It's hot. Why is that? Maybe it's this, maybe it's that, maybe it's that. And that's essentially getting yourself distracted. You're going down a rabbit hole.
Mm-hmm.
Just noticing my face is hot is the goal. In essence, it's not unlike being at the gym where you're engaging in reps. You're lifting and you're lifting a weight, and that's a rep. Mm-hmm. Every time you return back to your intended target is like a rep in mindfulness. You're not going to get swole immediately. That's not the point. Mm-hmm. The point is to do the rep, get distracted, return. Essentially, that is a rep.
Effort over time is hard to beat.
Yeah, it is.
And
I agree.
That sort of practice, you can get good at anything with enough practice, and effective practice, not just mumble jumble, haphazard practicing, but intentional practice. And one of the things that I've personally been practicing is communicating, particularly with my wife and my kids, because I want that communication to come from the right place. Even if I say the wrong words, even if it comes out wrong, I want whatever expression I'm making to be born out of the intended place. And my habits have been to gaslight, which is a mainstream favorite word for the last few years, which I hadn't heard of, but I'm excellent at it. Get defensive, wasn't me, it was something else. It wasn't my fault, whatever it might be. And to logic my way through something, whether it really makes sense or not. I can make it sound like it makes sense. And I've been practicing, and sometimes it sucks because it's like my ego is going, you could really flip this around and make it sound really good. But instead it takes practice, and I'm practicing. And I'm going to credit the community. I would say credit jiu-jitsu, but I'm going to say it's the community, and the practice itself. There's no faking your way through it. There's no gray. It's black or white. You either get or you get got. And the hierarchy is so clear that there's no pretending like you're good or bad at it. And so with your feelings and with your communication, you don't pretend. You just got to practice and get better. I was circling to a question, but I got so enamored with my own speaking, I lost it.
It's great. You got your level of insight into what most of us do around our egos is helping you to build habits of letting it go.
Well, I find. Go ahead,
Tyler. When you're in the moment of wanting to spin a story so that your ego benefits, what is your motivation to stay the course?
The motivation to stay the course would be for the experience to be genuine. Because I want the reality of it, good, bad, or ugly. Judge me for what's real, not for what you think or what it sounds like. And to circle back to what you were saying with breath, I now in conversation will sometimes just take a breath, big breath, and the person I'm talking to will look at me and going, why are you talking to me? What are you saying? What are you doing? It's like, I'm taking a breath, taking a beat, because this part of me over here wants to react. And that's not the part I want to react. I need a moment to access the place that I want to have this conversation from. So that breath that you talk about, very important to me.
Yeah.
But that's my intention in doing that, is the pursuit of being myself and genuine, and to experience the feeling of it, and not to hamster wheel my way through it.
Beautiful. Yeah.
Mhm.
You're following the value of authenticity and integrity there.
The practice, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Sure.
no question. And
I mean, that's what life is. It's like one cycle after another.
we've been on for a little over an hour.
Oh.
So right, it went fast.
Well, that was fast.
But I'll say, one, I want to give you an opportunity to talk about anything that you want to talk about, and then if you have anything, we'll finish with just a couple quick, kind of fun, rapid fire questions.
Yeah, sure. I would say things I want to talk about. I think we talked about some really great stuff. I would say for any man who might be interested in finding out more about coaching or men's community, please feel free to reach out. Probably the easiest way is via Instagram at braver.man.
It's a great page. It's a beautifully laid out page.
Thank you. Thank you.
This is kind of short answer. It's not rapid fire, but
Yeah.
give me the archetypal, the perfect is the wrong word, but provide for me a description of like the archetypal man.
Oh,
I
that's
know.
a great
That's
question.
It's a big
Boy,
question.
is that
too.
tough.
Yeah.
It is a big question. You know, a lot's been written about the archetypal or the archetypes of man. But, you know, I would say he's a man who is able to acknowledge his own personal values and priorities, is self-aware of his strengths and the ways in which he might get in his own way. And he seeks growth for the sake of serving his family, his workplace, his community, the world, in accordance with his own values. I think that's so personal. I don't think that there's a, you know, I've been part of other groups of men who have named outright the values of the ideal sort of archetypal man. And I think it's a setup for guys to feel like they're unable to do it in their own way, or that they've fallen short if they're not such and such height, weight, interest. Mm-hmm. And so I would say it's very personal, and it's a man who's dialed in to his values and priorities, a man who's looking to grow, who's looking to serve, not for himself alone, but for the world around him.
Would you adjust that if I was to ask you to do the same archetype exercise for a father?
No.
What are 2 to 3 character traits that you think every man or father should have, or if they don't have, pursue or cultivate?
What a good question. Patience and humility.
Tell me a little bit about the value of those two things.
Yeah. The value of patience is, maybe I'm speaking to myself here, Tyler. There's value to patience, I think, certainly for any father. But I think for a lot of guys, there's a sense of impatience for ourselves. We don't always give ourselves grace when things don't go to plan. We're quick to blame ourselves, and then beat ourselves up, fall off track. So I think that's a big element. That's a place that that is a strong area of vulnerability for men that could potentially be an area of huge strength. Humility is another one. I think that, I mean, to your point, around being aware of patterns that might be ego serving. When you're aware of those patterns and don't fall into them and recognize that there are values that are more important, values like connection or love or authenticity or integrity, you're able to move forward in an honest way. And so I think at the core of what you've identified here as insight to old patterns and a desire to change that, I don't think any of that could be done without your own humility. I think that's probably under, and by humility, I don't mean, you know, a place of self-loathing or even, you know, even a place of self-deprecation. I mean, a place of authentic confidence and a place of recognizing that my ego doesn't have to come first.
My wife accused me of gaslighting her about 2 weeks ago, and she was ready to battle. She was ready to go. We don't get in real heated arguments. We don't raise our voice. We don't yell at each other. We converse, but I default into logic and tying things together and trying to get my point across. And when she said, "You're gaslighting me right now," I took that breath. I thought about it. And I squashed the part of me that wanted to tell her how wrong she was. And I said, "You know what? You're right. I did. I'm sorry." And she was shocked, completely taken aback. It's like, "Oh, I didn't expect us to have this conversation. I expected us to have a different conversation." And that conversation that we did have was so great. And so the ego, I didn't miss it. I didn't miss trying to be right. I didn't miss, you know, the pursuit of an angle. I mean, it's fun to play the game in a weird kind of sadistic way. I love the devil's advocate, but like making that genuine connection of going, you know, you're right. You just made an assessment and you were right. And I need to adjust the way I'm communicating with you. And had I not been patient with myself to take the breath and humility, at least in that moment, to admit to being wrong, it would have been a different conversation. It wouldn't have been as good. So
I think good on you, man. That's awesome.
It's practice, man. Some things are better than others, but it's practice.
Of course, everything is.
So, what's a piece of advice someone gave you that you often give to other people? And it could be related to coaching or men's health or parenting or anything.
Yeah. You know, don't play small. Felt like an important bit of advice that I got from an old mentor during training after like post-medical school training as a fellow. I think I was finding my way around a pretty big field. The field of psychiatry is pretty broad. It's not always cut and dry like I think other fields in medicine tend to be. It can be pretty complicated and challenging. And there's a lot of opportunity for self-deprecating, or a lot of opportunity not to really find your confidence if you're someone who tends to be maybe overly modest. And I think it was an opportunity to find my own voice, to recognize there's something important in my, it may not be the be all end all, but there's something important in my perspective, in my take on the world.